welcome to the Improv Summit with this lovely background that I made in Photoshop and spent hours doing. I'm your host, as always, Spencer, and with me today, I've got a very special guest, Eddie. Eddie, how's it going today?
It's going pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You know, life in quarantine has been hit or miss, but luckily today I'm feeling like I'm gonna end the day strong. End the day strong. It's 10:30 in the morning Pacific, but I'm gonna end the day. Throughout the day, it's gonna end on a high note, so I'm excited. And this is the
Cool.
start of a lovely day. I can feel it already.
Great.
Anyway, let's dive in because everyone knows who I am and they know all about me and they know that I go on tangents in these things. So I'm going to give you as much chance to talk as possible and avoid me making these awkward conversations like I'm doing right now. Let's
Okay.
talk about you, Eddie. Eddie,
Okay.
talk about your improv background, whatever that means to you. What is your improv background?
Sure. I started doing improv when I was in high school. The I, for reasons I don't really want to get into, was kicked out of my high school's theater program and asked not to return. But luckily for me, my high school's improv team, which was comedy sports, was kind of independent of the theater program. So I was able to just kind of sneak in there. And once I'd always been a fan of like Whose Line Is It Anyway, and interested in the idea of improv. And once I started doing it, I was like, oh my God, this is so fun. And I was lucky enough to kind of get some positive reinforcement after the first couple shows. And I was like, okay, well, this is this is it for me. So I did improv in high school, in high school through comedy sports, in college through comedy sports, and then also at my college's improv troupe. And then I'm from LA and I've lived in LA my whole life. So I took classes at the Groundlings and IO. And then I went out to Wisconsin to do Paul Sill's workshop at his
Hmm.
barn in Door County. He's since passed away, but his barn in Door County. And I think that's pretty much my improv journey. I'm a main stage player at Comedy Sports LA and have been for so long now. And I'm the head coach of the main company at Comedy Sports.
Great. And I was going to say, you've been doing improv longer than some of the folks have been alive watching this or listening to this, but I actually don't know if that's true
Oh,
because
that's
I generally have
certainly.
more adult people watching this.
Oh, okay. I started doing improv in 2001, so this fall will be 20 years, which is crazy for me to think about. But yeah.
Yeah, 2001. On a side note, since we're talking about 2001, 2001 was the worst year I've ever had in my life, but that's a whole nother story. I just had two grandparents die. 9/11 happened, and that was when I was diagnosed with Coates disease and partial blindness. So it was a real wild ride at 10 years old.
Wow.
but but 20 years anniversary, they can always be uplifting and exciting too. So there you go. Anyway, enough about
Anyway,
my
enough about
my
major life tragedies. Let's talk about Eddie's beginnings of improv.
yeah, from one tragedy to the beginnings of a
Of another
beautiful.
tragedy.
Anyway, on that segue, because that's what we do here on the Improv Summit, is me doing this little maneuver of me trying to be on a segue, because that's also, I try with object work. You'll see, this is my computer, because apparently that's how computers work
So I
up
was
here.
taught, I come from comedy sports, and I think my first teachers were from Florida, and they called it space work, but a lot of people call it object work. Where were you first exposed to the phrase object work?
I had not heard of anything until comedy sports as far as
Interacting with your environment?
yeah, space, yeah. And I guess I've space work, I guess, is more of like a theater term that I've heard. Like
Mm,
I haven't heard it so much in improv. I've heard it more like okay, use the space work, like figure out where the chair is going to be, all this stuff, walk the
right, right.
space work in that way. So I never thought of object work and space work in a way being interchangeable because space always felt like a bigger thing to me, and object work always almost felt like an object. Like let me figure out how to hold a toothbrush. That's my object work versus like I'm in a bathroom. That's my space. Is
That's
that like
exactly that's a great description of it, and that's exactly why I like the term space work. Because when I found that when you tell students to use object work, they immediately just go to like props. But space work is also like your costume and then your environment. I have to go back and see what Viola Spolin called it. I know she definitely talks a lot about the environment. I mean, she's, I guess, theatery. I mean, it's
yeah?
not as theatery as it gets, but it's very theatery.
Which I think is also something to point out is like with improv, like a lot of actors are drawn to improv because it's very much in the theater realm. It's like an offshoot of theater in its own way. Like you got plays, and you've got like musical theater, improv, blah 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 blah, blah, blah. But it also, and I'm actually gonna segue into an actual question that actually works, because it actually is that I've noticed that like improv can also be for anyone who's also not a performer, right? Or anyone in the industry in general, whether it's a writer, a director, an improviser, improvising. That's not what I meant. An actor, but also like computer technicians or car mechanics can also take improv because there are certain elements of improv that can be used in daily life. What are some of the things, or like one like particular element of improv that you use in a non-entertainment aspect of your life?
Well, oh, there's a lot in your question I want to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, whatever you want.
So I never really wanted to be an actor. I, I had dreams when I was like 20 years old of being on SNL,
Don't we
that
all?
that were dashed long, long ago. But I just, for some reason, it never really appealed to me. And so I always knew that I was using improv not to develop acting techniques per se. Like I certainly have learned them, and they've been instrumental, but I'm not like using what I learn in improv to go like audition for a half-hour pilot,
Sure.
or a commercial. So I'm a writer. So for me, the most direct application of improv to writing is trusting that the next idea will also be good. In writers' rooms that I've been in, people who don't have an improv background, I think, hang on to their ideas a little more tightly.
Mm.
And it's like, you, as an improviser, you trust that, like, yeah, well, here's an idea. And if you don't like this one, like, I have another one, and I have another one, and I have another one. And if you give me 10 minutes, I'll have another one, like,
Mm.
um, and people who do improv know that like ideas are not valuable, or like an idea has value, but there are going to be 100 more behind it. Um, Comedy sports has certainly taught me to be funny right away. I'm a comedy writer, so that's certainly a skill that you need,
Mhm.
especially when you're pitching ideas in the room. It's like you're pitching an idea and you're like, oh, fuck that. Oh, sorry. I don't, yeah, people have
Everyone
cursors.
asked that. It's okay. I'm fine with it. At this point,
um,
I'm like, I'm not gonna go find it and edit it, so it's fine.
oh, fuck. That wasn't, I thought it was funny and nobody's laughing. Well, I need to come up with something to save this pitch, and that's certainly something that you learn in improv in general, but specifically in comedy sports where you have 3.5 minutes to make the audience laugh. Um, and then to that point, like changing direction right away, that's something that I learned early in comedy sports, is like, if what you're doing isn't flying with the audience, like you need to figure something new out. So
And quick.
yeah, yeah. So those are like direct applications, and then, but to your point that like anyone can take improv, I do agree. I think that everyone should take improv. I wish that it was like, I wish we lived in a society where it was funded in schools and you took it like
Mm.
PE. And even if it's a thing that you take for one semester in middle school and hate, I think that would be so valuable, especially for young people who have so much insecurity. I mean, everyone has insecurity, but like especially in adolescence where you're like so worried about everything. I think improv just teaches you to like go with the flow more. So in terms of non-performing, non-writing applications, I think that, understanding how to kind of give and take in a conversation, not like what I'm doing right now. Uh,
No, it's all about
and
you though. That's fine. I don't need to talk. People have heard me talk enough. So
and building something collaboratively. I think most jobs, if not every job, is collaborative and interpersonal. Even if you're not collaborative, even if you work at a toll booth, right? That's not a
mhm.
collaborative job. That is the definition of interpersonal. You're interacting with people, you have other coworkers, you have a boss. And I think improv teaches you kind of how to live in the world and deal with people who are different than you and have different ideas.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I mean, I feel like I could keep going, and
It's like a
I'm
whole nother conversation on its own.
I'm a true believer in improv. I've been doing it for 20 years and I teach it, and I married an improviser, but I'm trying to be interesting as well.
No, it's okay. I think everything's interesting. I think it's a point with a lot of the guests that I've had, but also like from my personal experience, one thing that I mentioned is is my confidence, which is completely unrelated to, just having confidence in general, because it all started back in the day. It was during my undergrad internship, and I say it because I don't think that my supervisors are watching this. If they are, calling you out, do better. But I had been told, like, I literally remember these things that I ended up making it into my thesis film in my master's program. But like, I was told I was the worst intern they've ever had. I had hit rock bottom. I was cornered in a room and asked if I felt like my performance during the day was being affected by what I did outside of my internship, and like all this stuff. And like in high school, I was told, if I want to be leads in school plays, I needed to lose 50 pounds and not wear my glasses on stage, which is all this like, it's like fat phobic and ableist and all these things. And so when I got like, you know, through college, I was like, this is what it is. If I want to be a performer, this is what I was like ringing true. So then I went to improv. And at first, when I first started improv, I was like, "Oh, I'm so bad at this. I can't think of anything. I don't know like what I'm doing." And then as I started to take more, and I started taking, I did IO, I did Second City, I did UCB, I did Comedy Sports, I did all the different programs that I felt like I'm still a little not at the confidence level of groundlings yet because of the fast fail rate.
Yeah.
But also, once I started to like figure out kind of how improv works, I started to build my confidence and my trust in myself to be able to actually do the improv, and realizing that in a way failure is great in improv
Hmm.
because it's like, oh no, I made a mistake. Oops, I failed. And it's like, oh, okay, well, no one remembers that happened. Like it became this moment where like all of a sudden I did that, and it's like I think of like that meme where it's like the dog drinking coffee and there's like a fire around and it's like
Yeah.
everything's going wrong. But like it's just, but I was like, that's what I was expecting to happen when I like, you know, quote unquote failed in improv. And it really was just me going like, all right, that didn't work. All right, let's do the next one. Like, and it's like, oh, nothing happens if I make an oops or a fail in improv. And really, there's no true mistakes in improv, unless, I mean, there are things you shouldn't do in improv, like, or things you shouldn't say because no isms. But other than that, there's really no mistakes. And I've learned the beauty of things that don't, it's like someone says something and I like don't know what they said. And so I think I heard it. And so I'll respond to that, and it's like something like vegetables, and I heard volcano, and I'm like, I
Hmm.
love being in Hawaii with you. This is just, I
Right.
can't wait for the lava to spew. And they're like over there cutting vegetables, and it's like, yeah, and I'll make all of the dinner for, like, it works out so well sometimes when you don't actually quite connect, but you discover the connection of these two misinterpreted ideas from the start. And so I learned that when that happens, there's no, anyways, the point was failure is great, and I've started to become more confident in myself as an individual because of improv, which
So
is what it is.
talking about improv scenes that have happened is like the fastest way to be unfunny. But
Which
one of the fun.
actually leads me into a question of, do you remember any improv scenes that you enjoyed watching or doing uh, in improv?
Well, to your point of like there are no mistakes, one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen, my wife was in, I wasn't, and the two players misheard in comedy sports. Sorry, we call them players. It just means improvisers. The players misheard the suggestion, or one of them misheard the suggestion. It was either coffee shop, like where you drink coffee, or copy shop, like a
Ah,
Kinko's, and it took a long time in the scene for them to realize that they were not in the same that they weren't on the same page. Oh my God. And as the audience member, you knew exactly the misunderstanding immediately. And you're just watching these like two trains heading for a collision. And it was just like so much
and you love
fun.
it.
Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
everyone says like, oh, you want to watch improv because like, what if they fail? I mean, I think that that's the type of failure people want to see. I think bad improv or genuinely unfunny improv or people who are not performers, that's not fun to watch. And but like to see the improvisers kind of going and you're like, oh man, how are they going to make this work? And then they did. It's like that's
Mhm.
so fun. I just want to step back and talk about, because earlier I said every junior high student should do improv, and then I just said that some people are not performers. I think that everyone should learn improv. I do not think that everyone should be performing improv for a paying audience. I'm a huge improv snob when it comes to that idea. I disagree with a lot of people will tell you like, no, everyone with enough training should be able to get on stage and do it. I think that you can, but like, should they? So that's what I'll say
It's
there.
also a skill, which also I want to point out. You said copy shop, and they weren't on the same page, so I just wanted to throw that out there because I have to get my puns in at some point during the interviews. Um, but it's interesting. It's just like, people who are actors are not necessarily improvisers. People who are improvisers aren't necessarily actors, even though they're both performance based. And also looking at it like film and TV versus theater, there are some people who can perform on camera all day, and there are some people who are just not able to perform in front of an audience. It's a whole different feeling and a whole different experience, which is why a lot of directors love having theater people, because theater people are used to performing in front of an audience
Hmm.
versus film and TV people, because there are some people who are naturally good at both. And of course, there are people who are just naturally great improvisers without ever having taken a class. And that's just curses. But it's one of those things where it is a point to, like, everyone should definitely take it and learn it, but not everyone should be performing it. And I've also learned, like, there are certain, like, I've auditioned for, numerous improv shows. It's like, how do you judge improv, really? Like, I mean, how do you? But there are certain shows where I will go back multiple times, or I'm like, or like I'll get in and I'm like, these feel like a fit for my brand and for my style of play or my style of improv. And there are other times where I'll go and I'm like, I did that audition, I didn't get it, and I'm like, I don't think that's for me. And it's like, I can kind of, now having done so much improv, I can kind of pick up on where feels like a good fit and where it doesn't. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? Let me just try and see what happens. And then if it does, great. If it doesn't, it's like, okay, I tried, it didn't work. And I think that they also noticed my brand didn't match what their brand was or whatever. And that happens. And I've also can attest to the fact that auditioning multiple times can help in improv auditions. So you teach also. So were there any moments, as you as a teacher saw, or as a coach saw, any aha moments in anyone you were coaching or teaching, or vice versa? Did you have any aha moments, whether watching a show or performing in a show, where improv kind of clicked, or there was just something that was just so wonderful that you experienced, whether it was on or off stage?
Well, oh boy. Yes, is the answer to your question. Next question.
Great. Next
Uh,
question.
so I do teach, but what I really enjoy, like my favorite thing to do with improv is to direct long form improv shows, and I I like it because there's a puzzle. There are several puzzles to figure out. One is the group dynamic. How do you get this group of people, some of whom don't like each other, some of whom don't think that other people belong in the group or at the level that they're at? How do you get them over the course of 7 or 8 rehearsals to function as a unit? And I've done a lot of, this is like something that I've really done deep dives on, specifically Phil Jackson, who's a basketball coach, his books about getting superstars like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant to pass the ball to their teammates are actually very applicable to improv, because on a basketball team, you have a superstar, but then on a given night, you might need the seventh guy, on the team, the seventh highest scorer to make the game-winning shot. And the same is true in improv. You have 2 or 3 people in the cast who you're like, they could be fun. You could drop them on Mars and they would make Martians laugh. How do I get them to yes and the person who they don't think they belong? Like how do they get them to be funny in the show and to be the superstar? And so I highly recommend Phil Jackson's books for anyone who's interested in that. So there's that dynamic that you have to figure out as the director. And then there's also the dynamic of, in what order do you, or how do you present this show to these improvisers, all of whom are skeptical that this show will work? Every improviser, whenever you teach them a new show, they just want to go out and do a montage. That's all any because like improvisers by nature are lazy. We became improvisers because we don't want to memorize lines. So when you're trying to teach them an improv format, they're like, yeah, but what if we just did a montage? So how do you?
I got to remember the form.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That is a big part. How do you present a format or a style or whatever and get buy-in along the way, and then give them enough positive reinforcement and confidence so that they can deliver the show once they're put in front of an audience? And if, in a perfect world, I would have 20 rehearsals to do this. But again, improvisers, they need immediate gratification. I can't keep people coming to rehearsal if I schedule more than 8. So I have 8 rehearsals, 7 or 8 rehearsals. How do I get them to deliver? And it happens at different times for different people, and you don't have to make the show perfect by opening night. You just have to get it good enough so that an audience will enjoy it. Again, they get that positive reinforcement, and we can continue to work on things as it goes. So there are aha moments all throughout the process. I mean, including sometimes after a show closes, like specifically shows that don't work, that I never found it. Like sometimes I'll be lying in bed months after the show closed, and I'll be like, oh, that's what I messed up. If I had switched rehearsal number 3 and rehearsal number 6, if I had taught the skills in the other opposite order, I would have had a better chance of connecting it.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, what do you want to talk? Which part of the puzzle do you want to talk about?
No, I mean, there's like so much. I mean, I think even just like what I love is, I think, at least when I first started improv, I was like, everyone's so good, they're so perfect at improv, and I don't know how to do it. And like, it's like, I love it when like a coach or a teacher is like, shoot, I should have done it this way, because it shows me that like, even with years of experience, I'm still learning. And I think that that's really great that you brought that up, because it's like, it almost feels like I'm like, oh, once I hit 5 years, I'm like, that's it, I'm not going to mess up an improv ever again. And it's like, I don't know why, myself included, why we have this idea of like, the 10,000 hours. Once you hit 10,000 hours, you're a perfect improviser, which perfect is such a harsh word for anyone in the entertainment industry, because I get told in auditions that was perfect. And I'm like, great, if it was perfect, why didn't you cast me?
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I think it's great to kind of have that aspect and that point of view as well, of, as a coach, as a teacher, I realized I should have flipped these, or like, I didn't explain that well, or I cast this team and, oh, the dynamic doesn't necessarily work, but now I've got to figure out how to deal with that. And so it's not that it's great that that's happened, but it's great that, as someone who, I wouldn't even say I'm like a great improviser by any means, because I'm like just getting past the class phases and getting more into the rep stage, that um for me, it's great to see that like, I'm in a trajectory where I know it's okay to continue to learn and to continue to quote unquote fail, because no one's perfect. And so I think it's just from that perspective of someone who performs but also coaches and directs, knowing that whether you're a performer or behind the scenes, that you can still make those moments where you're like, whoops. And then luckily with improvisers, you're able to kind of fix it pretty quickly and readjust and be like, okay, great, that didn't work, let's do something else, let's try this.
Yeah.
Especially with improv Zoom.
I think that there is a way to get perfect at
Mm.
improv. If you just took level 101 at a theater over and over and over again, you would get so good at those exercises, because the curriculum doesn't change that often, and
True.
you would crush it. I mean, like, if you didn't tell the teacher or the other students that was your 7th time taking 101, all the other people would be like, oh my God, he is killing word at a time story, right? But who was that helpful for? I don't think one would find joy in being the best 101 improviser. I don't think it would be helpful to your team, your classmates. And that's kind of how I look at improv. Like, there are many points along the way where I could have just been like, this is where I want to stay. Like when I made the main company at Comedy Sports, I had been working towards that for a long, long time. And I could have just been a performer, done 2 shows a month, put on the back then sweatpants and the red jersey or blue jersey, and been very happy. And that had been what I was working toward for so long. It would have been an easy move to make. And I don't fault anyone who that is their move, but I knew that I wanted to continue to challenge myself, and that the challenge I was most interested in was in directing shows. For other people, once they make the main company, it's like, great, now I'm going to go do UCB or whatever, because that's the challenge that they want to take, or they want to apply improv to stand up or to writing. I think that it's important for us, like, improv doesn't pay you so well, it doesn't pay you well at all, that it behooves you to become an expert at any level. I think that if you're a true improviser, you should be challenging yourself, using the skills to challenge yourself in a new way. I don't know what got me there, but that's how
No,
I feel.
that's great. It made me think of talk about myself again because
Great.
that's apparently what happens on this improv summit. It's not about the guests; it's about me now. No, but this one's quick. But it makes me think of like that time when I do improv and I get like the butterflies on my stomach, where I'm like, this feels right because I know that it's something that's kind of scary for me, but I know that I'm not. It's not like freaking me out to the point where I can't do it. I'm like, oh, like I did a Shakespeare improv class at Impro, and I was like, oh, Shakespeare's so
Yeah.
hard. I don't know. And I went to it and it was broken down so well that it was like, okay, here's a list of compliments. Here's a list of insults. We're just going to walk around and Zoom. We're going to walk around and Zoom and you're just going to use two insults, put them together and like call them like a blank blank man or,
Right.
whatever. And I was like, oh, that's so easy. I can do that. I'm literally picking two words off of you.
Yeah.
But then I went through with the idea of like, oh, I can put these words together and create an insult, and then we built from there. We started to build like phrases and stanzas, and then we went into doing scenes. And the whole time I was like, but then I also was like, oh, I take all of this improv that I've already learned. I'm just adding some Shakespeare flavor into it, and then I can do it. I might not be perfect at it, but it's an improv intro to Shakespeare. Like if I want to keep doing it, I can keep building that skill. So that was great. Jane Austen was also the same way. It's about the time period and adding that flavor into the general like salt and pepper of yes and you add in whatever kind of extra spices and flavors you want to make it and build those skills, which leads me into a question that's completely unrelated, but I mean maybe it's related. Like, it could be related, why not? To you, what makes it, I don't want to say good, I've changed it. To you, what makes a successful improviser?
Oh, improviser.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to ask like a successful scene.
Well, let's talk about that too. What makes a successful scene and a successful improviser?
Well, a successful scene has surprise and discovery, or discovery and surprise. That's what I'm looking for in anything I direct. Again, because like I direct improvisers at a pretty high level. They've been doing it for a long time. They know that they're funny. They've been funny in lots of groups.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be very easy for them to just do shtick that they know works. And there are some comedy sports directors who would encourage that. I'm not one of them. I get very bored of shtick very easily. I want to see you discover something new. And so to toot my own horn for a second, is that the phrase? Yeah.
Yeah.
Toot my own
We could
horn.
talk about phrases all day.
I once threw out my back and I couldn't find anyone to cover me in a comedy sports match. So I had to play. Well, I didn't have to, but I felt
Yeah.
bad bailing on the show.
Well, good
with
for
such
you
short
for
notice.
actually playing.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, I need to make the first offer in every game so that I don't accidentally get endowed. Like I don't get put in a position where I have to do something physically that it's just going to injure me further.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was coming out of the gate just like loaded for bear. And that's mixing metaphors, but I was really going for it. And I was like, this is who my character is. This is the objective of the scene, because I could not risk being like, oh, there's the cartwheel guy, someone doing that to me. And afterwards, one of my friends who had been performing with, like, we came up together through comedy sports. He was like, I've never seen you improvise like that. And it was that surprise that I had the ability to surprise myself, kind of like what you're saying of like giving yourself a challenge either before the game or before the entire show, and then being like, okay, how can I rise to this challenge? And I did it that day. So I'm looking for, in improv, I'm looking for surprise and discovery. Can you surprise your scene partner? Can you surprise yourself? And are you willing to discover something new in the scene?
Mm-hmm.
In an improviser, I'm looking for, it's the Zen approach, or it's being in the zone, and it's so difficult to describe. Have you read Zen and the Art of Archery?
Mm-mm.
Oh, that's another book I highly recommend for improvisers, because it's about this German guy who lived in Japan and wanted to study archery. And like, these are like old school, huge bows. This is not how big they are. This is tiny, very large bows. And like, he couldn't even pull the bowstring back, and the arrow would just kind of like hit the ground. And over the course of learning like the proper breath work, he could hit the bullseye, I don't know how far away. And applying that to improv, that he thought that he needed to get stronger in order to pull the bowstring back. And like the person who's teaching him archery, who's this like older Japanese dude, is like, no, it's not about strength, it's about proper breathing. So anyway, to come back to improv, another thing I compare it to, sorry, I said I'm coming back to improv, but now I'm going to talk
No,
about
it's
the
all
Matrix.
good. I love it.
In the Matrix, he's like, are you saying I can dodge bullets? And they say, no, Neo, what I'm saying is you won't have to, or you won't need to, or something like that. And then spoiler alert for a 22-year-old movie, you see that what you think is the climax of the movie, he dodges bullets. And then what is really the climax of the movie, he doesn't need to. He can stop, again, spoiler alert, stop the bullets. What I'm looking for is an improviser who can stop the bullets, who is so comfortable in their own skin, in their own skill, that they can initiate the scene. They can be the second person in the scene. They can be the third person in the scene. They can be the fourth person in the scene. They can still make themselves funny. They can still make sure everyone else looks good in it. They can truly yes and whatever the offer is, right? Like so many times I feel, so I've sat on the panel of many, many, many auditions, and I can tell when improvisers are upset that they got stuck in a scene with a bad improviser. Like their scene partner was not good. And if like, I wish this is me telling them, that is the best position for you to be in. Because when the scene goes bad, we don't hold it against you. Like you had a bad scene partner who wasn't yes-anding you, or who was negating you, or who bailed on their own character, whatever, 100 ways you can make an improv scene go bad. But if you can make that scene good, you're on the team. Like, and especially at comedy sports where we bring audience members up on stage every night, well, when we had a stage, if you can make the bad improviser look good, I know you can make the audience member look good. And that's such a big part of our show. So what am I looking for in an improviser? It's that they can stop bullets.
That's great. I think comedy sports is very interesting on its own because it's played as a team sport. Mm-hmm. And I think that what a lot of improvisers tend to forget is like, yeah, you want to be funny and you want to have a good time, but you also have 3 other people or 4, 2 or 3 other people that you're on a team with that you also have to get into games. And I remember playing one game. I don't remember what game it was, but I was like the last person. Oh, it was like Countdown. And I was the last person to go in, and it was like a family of 3, and it was very clear that it was a family of 3. And I was like, I'm the 4th person. I was like, how do I jump into this family of 3 thing at the beach? And they started talking about like different animals, and so I just went in and was every single animal every time. And then it became me at the last 10 seconds. I was like a dolphin and a snake and whatever all at the same time. And it was so funny. I didn't say one single word, but I made a bunch of noises, and it worked out because I wasn't forcing myself into the scene. Mm-hmm. But I also was like, okay, I have to discover, because there's like 10 seconds left of the scene. I got to figure out how to get myself in there. Otherwise, it's going to be weird if I'm just sitting on the sideline, like not doing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it became, and so I think that's one thing that's great about comedy sports is it allowed, at least for me, it allows me to balance both the individual improv and also working with a team, and knowing that I have to basically 50-50. They have to be balanced together, which I think is great. Which leads me into, oh no, you have something you want to say.
No, I mean that balance, that friction is the heart of improv, right? It's like, how do I set myself up? How do I set them up? And then with comedy sports, the third layer, but it's actually the most important layer, is how do I make the audience have a good time? In comedy sports, we're audience first. So, your stuff doesn't matter. It's about how do we get them to enjoy themselves. In other theaters kind of have a different equation, but that's the comedy sports kind of philosophy. And I thought of another metaphor for what I'm looking for. And this is specific or most relevant to improv auditions, which, as you said, are the worst. It's the worst.
The worst.
I wish it were the high jump, because then we could just go like, did you make the jump or did you not? Great, But it's so subjective. We try to pretend like it's not subjective, but it is subjective. But I always think about Red in The Shawshank Redemption, who he, like, when he's up for parole and he says all the right things and he's so sorry, and then they don't release him. And then the next time he comes up, again, spoiler alert, but this is for like a 30-year-old movie.
Yeah, if you haven't seen this by now, you're probably never going to watch it, but you should. It's a great movie.
Yeah. when he comes up, he's like, I don't care if you know what you think about me. Like, there's nothing you can do. And then that's the time that they release him. And that really is the case I've found for improv auditions, that people come in really wanting it, and you should want it, but like you can just feel the hunger, and that makes me nervous. And if the audience is nervous, they're not laughing. If the audience is confused, they're not laughing. But let's not talk about confusion for now. So that hunger is not helping your case. I've seen people come in with a false confidence and they're shaking every hand in the room. That also makes me uncomfortable. And I'm not going to laugh if I'm uncomfortable. And I've seen the people who come in and like, you can see that they in the car said, I'm going to do one high status character. I'm going to do one low status character. I'm going to do one balls to the wall character. I'm going to do one softer, whatever. And it's like that. I see, I've been doing this a long time. I see what you're doing, you know?
You can see the prep.
Yeah. And it really is when you just come in and you're willing to take whatever, again, to use my Phil Jackson, whatever the defense gives you, and you can play with that. That's the improviser I want to put in the show. But there's no way, like, that is the true Zen, you've reached the true Zen moment in improv, because you can play with anyone in any game and make it successful.
That's great. It makes me think of, and this may have been the one you watched, but it makes me think of the time when we had just finished, I'll say it, Blind Line, Someone with Partial Blindness. That title's a little, but it's called Blind Line currently. But from Blind Line, we went into, it was X word sentences. And I think I had like 4 words. And at one point I was like, I know that we always get points for pulling up the lines that weren't used in other games. So I was like, I'll do that. I was like, let me just see what happens with this X word sentences. And it's back to that surprise and discovery, because I went and picked it up and it was like 4 words. And I literally pulled it up and said, I am a cat. And I went, that's 4 words. I was like so shocked and surprised. And it was like so great. And like, you could see it in my whole body that I was so surprised that I actually fit into the game.
Yeah.
And then I was like, but then it became that false confidence where the second time I'm gonna do the same thing again. Here we go. I'm gonna do the same thing again. And I opened it and I was like, this is way longer than 4 words. But the audience loved that. It was enjoyable because it was this fun thing of like, it happened once. Is it gonna happen again? Ooh, I don't know. But that surprise and discovery was great. Let's change it up a little bit. Do you have any plugs or pitches? Anything you want to share, spread?
I wrote for the animated show Duncanville, which is on Fox, and it comes back in May. I wish I knew the dates. It comes back in late May. It's going to debut on a Sunday, and then it's switching to Fox is trying Monday night cartoons. So I would be appreciative if anybody watched that, or you can find it on Hulu. And that's it for now, I think.
Great. Last question I have for you, which is the main reason I do this, and I actually didn't prep you on it before, so this is going to be an interesting one. But you've seen the episode, so you know what the question is going to be. The reason why I'm kind of doing this improv summit is because back when improv was done in person, but even still now online, a lot of people that I know who are specifically actors, but just people are like, Spencer, you do a lot of improv. Where should I take improv?
Oh yeah.
It's hard for me to answer that question because like we said, improv is so vast and so broad that it's hard to just be like, oh yeah, you look like you would be this kind of a person, or like you look like a UCB type, or you look like because there's no real type to a person's like look of improv. Like you don't look a certain type of improv, but anyways, there's a lot to that question. So it's basically just, if someone came up to you and said, Eddie, where should I take improv? What would be one piece of advice or one tidbit that you'd give to them to help start them on their hopeful improv journey to continue on for the future?
I know other people have kind of hedged their bets on this answer, but I'm going to as well.
Sure.
I think that it depends what you want to do. If you want to be a performer, if you want to take the class so that eventually you can be on stage performing, then you should take the class at the theater where when you go to their shows, you're like, I want to hang out with those people, because every improv theater is a cult. And from the top, from the artistic director all the way down to the person in 101, people are generally have the same kind of improv vibe. That improv theaters are self-selecting that way. So, I mean, there's no improv theaters performing in California right now, but if you went to UCB and saw Shitty Jobs is probably there, or ASCAT, and you were like, I want to hang out with those dudes. I mean, the people who do those shows are really funny.
Great shows.
Then
Yeah.
you should do UCB. If you go to Comedy Sports and you're like, I want to hang out with those dudes, I would love to hang out with you. And, you should do that. If you want to be a performer, that's probably that should be your guiding principle. If you don't want to be a performer, then I think you would want to take a class at some place where you're not going to be competing with those people who are very kind of singularly minded towards getting on stage. So I know that Groundlings used to offer fun shops. I don't know if what anybody's offering during COVID, but it was like a chance for people who just wanted they were exploring a hobby. I think Comedy Sports is a very low, especially in the low level 101, 201, it's low pressure. You're not going to be sitting next to someone who's like, I'm going to get on Saturday Night Live. Like we don't have that vibe. But for that matter,
what if we did?
You could
what
also,
if we did?
If you were a non-performer, if you're the accountant or the data analyst and you just wanted to explore a hobby, like your local rec center probably offers an improv class. Like there's no bad way to take a beginning improv class. And to that point, I would say if you are one of those people who wants to be a performer, once you kind of get wherever you need to get in order to audition for the teams, like at UCB, it's like you have to pass level 401 or whatever. You should then go take an improv class somewhere else. I know I'm preaching to the choir because you've taken improv classes pretty much everywhere, but like you're just a product of their system until you take a class somewhere else and figure out what do you, the individual, believe about improv. I just during quarantine read Improvise by Mick Napier, which is I disagreed with almost every word in the book, and I would recommend it to every improviser I know, because it's like it makes you go like, wait, why do I disagree with this? What do I believe, versus what Mick believes. And I'm sure if I wrote an improv book, I would hope that someone would disagree with every word of it as well, so that I hope that answers the question.
Well, thanks so much for joining me, Eddie. I said that was the last question I had for you, but as always on the Improv Summit here, I am a big liar, and I have one more question for you. And that question is, we've been talking a lot about improv. Would you like to do some improv?
Sure.
All right, let's do it. Your suggestion is programming.
Marcus, you know how you took the long weekend?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, we didn't know how to reach you, and the app went viral over the weekend.
Oh, that's great. That's great. We're up and running.
No. Yeah, no. I'm sorry. I don't. Sometimes I don't use the right terminology. It's infecting other computers and devices. That's viral, right? I mean, like a virus.
Oh, you mean this just infecting computers with a virus?
Yeah,
Going
yeah.
viral is a whole nother thing. That's like a social media term for like really going big.
Marcus, focus. Focus, Marcus.
Sorry.
Our app is infecting lots of not only our users, but our users' parents' computers, our users' siblings' computers, our users' siblings' banks' computers. We're in big doo-doo.
Well, I think we just have to stop the app from being downloaded. That's just it's a quick fix. Just stop it from being downloaded and tell people that it's a beta test. It's a beta test, and we have to have everyone just re-download it.
I am not the programmer. You are, Marcus. Type. Make it happen.
Okay. Okay. So let's do 1 2 6 5 8 2 9 asterisk right caret left caret hashtag, which is a number sign.
I don't think you're doing anything, Marcus.
I think you want this app to ruin people's lives and our company.
Um, we're here at Beta Testers Inc. What if I told you I had a connection to Alpha Testers Inc.?
You'd leave us?
Oh, I mean, like I'm the CEO of Alpha Testers Inc. I was trying to bring you down. Like I did it on purpose.
How could you, Marcus?
I wanted to be the only company that was Testers Inc.
You,
And also, to be honest, Alpha Testers Inc. is great, but Beta Testers Inc. There's no B in the Greek language. It'd actually be Vita Testers Inc. So really, I couldn't stand by with you just kind of not really using a proper terminology for your company. So I'm gonna go back to Alpha
I
Testers
invited
Inc.
you. I invited you to carpool with me to work.
Yeah, and I appreciate that carpool. My car's in the shop, so it was just very nice of you to offer.
Wow.
So I figured I would just tell you the truth.
Well, I'm gonna probably go to jail for this for a long time, but thank you, Marcus. I hope you and alpha testers are happy.
We are. We are. We got you off the market. Well, we will eventually. I mean, pretty soon, actually.
Just leave your ID badge when you go.
Okay, sure. It's a fake ID, anyways. And scene. Thanks everybody so much for coming to the Improv Summit. I'm Spencer. That's Eddie. See you next time. Bye.